Our First Sorties, The Birth of America's Fighter Aces, April 1918. The skies over Europe are a battleground, a crucible where the future of aerial warfare is being forged. Among the pilots daring enough to face the perils of the sky is Lieutenant Eddie Rickenbacker, a former race car driver turned fighter ace. In his memoir, Fighting the Flying Circus, Rickenbacker recounts the harrowing experiences of America's first all-American fighter squadron. "We were indeed a happy lot of pilots," he writes, "for we were reading on our new operations board the first warflight order ever given by an all-American squadron commander to all-American pilots." On the eve of April 13, 1918, the pilots of the 94th Aero Squadron, famously known as the Hat in the Ring Squadron, gathered around their operations board at the Gengoult Aerodrome near Toul, France. The suspense was palpable. The flight order was explicit. Date: April 14, 1918, 0600 hours. Mission: patrol from Pont-à-Mousson to Saint-Mihiel at an altitude of 16,000 feet. Duration: 2 hours. Assigned pilots: Captain James Norman Hall Peterson, Lieutenant Reed Chambers, and Lieutenant Eddie Vive Rickenbacker. Captain Peterson would lead the flight, marking the commencement of combat operations for the first all-American pursuit squadron in World War I. The success of aerial patrols in 1918 hinged on meticulous preparation and an intimate understanding of the terrain. The sector between Pont-à-Mousson and Saint-Mihiel was a hotspot, with intense air activity due to its proximity to the German stronghold at Metz. Enemy squadrons, including the feared Jagdstaffel units equipped with Albatros and Fokker aircraft, were known to patrol aggressively. Rickenbacker and his fellow pilots drilled the geography into their memories. Rivers like the Moselle, railways, and even the smallest villages served as navigational aids in an era before electronic instruments. That night, in Captain Peterson's quarters, the pilots discussed tactics and contingency plans. Peterson emphasized the chain of command. Should anything happen to him, Rickenbacker was to assume lead of the patrol. But sleep did not come easily. Rickenbacker later reflected, "I thought over everything I had ever read or heard about aeroplane fighting. I imagined the enemies coming at me from every direction." His anticipation was a blend of excitement and the sobering reality of the dangers ahead. Dawn broke on April 14, 1918, revealing a world shrouded in mist. The thick fog reduced visibility to mere yards, a significant hazard given the rudimentary flight instruments of the time. Over breakfast, the pilots shared light-hearted banter, masking their underlying tension. They teased Campbell and Winslow, who were assigned to standby alert duty, suggesting they be ready for the swarm of German planes they intended to provoke. Despite the poor conditions, Captain Peterson ordered Rickenbacker and Chambers to ascend to 1,500 feet for reconnaissance. Their Newport 28 aircraft, though nimble, were notorious for structural weaknesses, particularly the tendency for fabric to tear off the upper wing during steep dives, a flaw that would soon prove perilous. As Rickenbacker and Chambers climbed, they became enveloped in the dense fog. Captain Peterson, recognizing the danger, returned to base. Unaware, Rickenbacker assumed command, determined to continue the mission. They reached 16,000 feet, the cold biting despite their heavy gear. For the first time, they encountered German anti-aircraft artillery, known colloquially as Archy. The Germans, utilizing the 77mm guns with accuracy tables derived from extensive ballistic calculations, fired timed shells that burst at their altitude. Chambers, new to this experience, was startled as the black puffs of shrapnel exploded around them. Rickenbacker noted, "He sheared in so close to me that we nearly collided." After several circuits between Pont-à-Mousson and Saint-Mihiel without sighting enemy aircraft, they faced a dire situation. The fog had thickened, obscuring all landmarks. With fuel running low, a typical Newport 28 carried just over 2 hours' worth of fuel, they had to make a critical decision. Rickenbacker chose to descend cautiously through the fog, acutely aware of the 1,500-foot elevation of the terrain and the potential for colliding with unseen obstacles. At approximately 1,000 feet, he caught sight of a distinctive Y-shaped railroad junction and a tunnel near Commercy, a stroke of navigational luck. This landmark allowed him to orient himself and plot a course back to Toul. Upon landing, Rickenbacker was met by an irate Captain Peterson, who reprimanded him for the reckless decision to proceed in such hazardous conditions. Their concern turned to Chambers, who was still unaccounted for. Suddenly, the alarm sounded. Enemy aircraft were reported over Faug. Lieutenants Douglas Campbell and Alan Winslow seized the opportunity. The German pilots, Lieutenants Hans Schütz and Georg Dohr from Jagdstaffel 64, flying Pfalz D-3 fighters, had ventured over Allied lines, perhaps seeking Rickenbacker and Chambers as reported targets. In a remarkable engagement, Winslow shot down Schütz's aircraft, which crashed in flames on the airfield itself, a testament to both skill and fortune. Moments later, Campbell engaged Dohr, who, disoriented in the fog, crashed nearby. These were significant victories. The first enemy aircraft downed by an entirely American squadron, and both within sight of their own aerodrome. The impact of these victories was profound. French civilians in Toul, long subjected to German air raids without effective defense, erupted in celebration. They lauded the American pilots, showering them with toasts of the finest Moselle wine and exclamations of Vive l'Amérique. The downed German aircraft were transported to the town square, serving both as trophies and morale boosters. For the 94th Aero Squadron, April 14, 1918, became a hallmark date, symbolizing not only their baptism by fire but the validation of American prowess in the skies over Europe. That evening, Chambers returned safely, having landed at a distant field due to the fog. Despite the initial triumphs, the squadron grappled with the realities of war and their own inexperience. Inclement weather grounded flights for several days. During this hiatus, an American hospital unit arrived, bringing much-needed medical support and a touch of home. Interaction with the nurses provided a brief respite from the rigors of combat. On April 18th, Rickenbacker and Chambers responded to another alert. In their eagerness, they failed to verify their headings accurately. Without the aid of advanced navigational instruments, gyrocompasses were not standard in aircraft until much later. They relied on basic magnetic compasses, prone to deviation errors caused by the aircraft's metal components and engine magnetos. Rickenbacker recounted, "I had been trusting to my boasted sense of direction. I had led Chambers in exactly the opposite direction from the spot where the boat was waiting for us." This misadventure underscored the critical importance of precise navigation and the perils of overconfidence. On April 23rd, another lesson awaited. Rickenbacker, flying a solo patrol after reports of enemy activity over Pont-à-Mousson, spotted an aircraft approaching. In the fraught seconds that followed, he attempted to identify the plane. The challenge was immense. Aircraft silhouettes could be deceiving, and the national markings were sometimes obscured or modified. The aircraft was a French SPAD 13, piloted by an ally. However, miscommunication and suspicion led to a tense aerial duel. Rickenbacker noted, "Since that day, I have never taken any chances with any airplane in my vicinity, whether it was friend or foe. Some friends are better shots than our casual enemies." This incident highlighted a significant issue of the time, the risk of friendly fire in aerial combat. Standardized identification protocols and clearer markings were needed, but were challenging to implement uniformly across all units. Determined to secure a victory, Rickenbacker took to the skies again on April 24th, despite low cloud cover and visibility issues. Flying perilously at 3,000 feet, he ventured deep into enemy territory near Saint-Mihiel. The area's dense network of anti-aircraft batteries, equipped with the formidable 88mm flak guns, posed a constant threat. Spotting what he believed was a vulnerable German observation plane, a potential LVG-CV or Rumpler C-7, he prepared to engage. However, recalling the tactical admonitions of the experienced Major Raoul Lufbery, he hesitated. "Always remember it may be a trap," Lufbery had warned. His caution was justified. An Albatros Diva fighter emerged from the clouds above. A common German tactic was to use decoy aircraft to lure opponents into ambushes. As Rickenbacker maneuvered to evade, two more enemy fighters appeared, a patrol formation aiming to overwhelm solitary pilots. The technical capabilities of the Albatros, with its 180 horsepower Mercedes D3A engine, allowed it to compete effectively with the Nieuport. Engaging in evasive maneuvers, Rickenbacker exploited the cloud cover. Using a series of climbing turns, dives, and the occasional Immelmann, a half loop followed by a half roll, he managed to shake his pursuers. The experiences of these early sorties were invaluable. The pilots of the 94th Aero Squadron began to shed their initial overconfidence, replacing it with tactical prudence and technical proficiency. They studied enemy tactics, aircraft capabilities, and improved their communication. Technological limitations of the time demanded innovative approaches. Without radios, coordination relied on prearranged signals and visual cues, a precarious method in the chaos of combat. The squadron started flying in formations that provided mutual protection, like the Vic formation, a V-shaped arrangement that allowed for better coverage. Rickenbacker's personal growth was evident. He transitioned from a novice pilot to a tactician who appreciated the nuances of aerial warfare. Reflecting on his narrow escape, he acknowledged the blend of skill and fortune that survival required. The first sorties of the 94th Aero Squadron were more than mere missions. They were the forging of a new era in military aviation. The lessons learned in those critical days in April 1918 laid the groundwork for tactics and strategies that would evolve throughout the war. Eddie Rickenbacker would go on to become America's ace of aces, credited with 26 aerial victories. His reflections offer profound insights into the challenges and exhilarations of early air combat. He once mused, "War to us was very much of a plunge into an unknown planet. Ever constant was the impression that luck might for an instant desert us, and that instant would end the war for us." As we honor the courage and sacrifices of these pioneering aviators, their stories continue to inspire. They remind us of a time when intrepid individuals took to the skies with little more than canvas, wood, and an indomitable spirit, forever changing the face of warfare. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the early days of aerial combat. To delve deeper into the exploits of Eddie Rickenbacker and the 94th Aero Squadron, consider reading his memoir, Fighting the Flying Circus, and exploring historical records from World War I. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth analyses of pivotal moments in aviation history.